So we are on our last leg of Grand Round series, talking about different things about research. We spoke about how research is done at KKISH. What are the methods of research? We spoke. Can you hear me? Uh, People can't hear me. It's making noise. Hello. That's better. Okay, gotta go real close. Can somebody turn the mic up a little bit? Because I have to literally touch the microphone to speak. Hear myself too. So we talked over the last 4 weeks about different aspects of research, and then last time we talked about data collection and about translational research and issues about research. So once you finally collect your data, you have to write a paper. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, and we have two excellent speakers, very high volume publishers who are going to help us. We had a third speaker, Dr. Abu Amra from the university, who was supposed to speak, but unfortunately he couldn't make it, and you're going to have to hear me speak again. So without much ado, I'm going to call on Dr. Arif Khan to give the first talk on how to submit a paper for publication.
Thank you, Deepak. I'd like to congratulate the research department for putting this mini symposium together. I think it's very helpful for people who are starting out and even people who have been in practice for some time, because just because you're trained as a doctor doesn't mean you know how to do research. That's not always part of training. It certainly wasn't part of mine when I first started out. And I'm trying to go back. Let's see. Here we go. So I congratulate the research department for that. And I also thank Deepak and the organizers for asking me and allowing me to participate. What I've been asked to talk about is submitting a manuscript. And specifically, I was asked to speak about do's and don'ts for submitting a manuscript. So you've done your research, you had your proposal, you finished your proposal, you've collected your data, you had your idea and everything, and you're ready to submit a manuscript. You've put together a draft, you have your ideas, and you have your references, and it's time to submit. So this is the part I'm going to be talking about. And I'm going to be talking about basically 5 do's and 5 don'ts. Just from my experience, of course, this is subjective. This is my experience as an author submitting manuscripts, as a reviewer, and also as member of some editorial boards. So the first thing we're going to start with are the do's. And the first do is choose an appropriate journal. What do we mean by that? Well, you need to have choose a journal. There are many journals out there. You want to choose a journal that's appropriate for what you're talking about. If your research is about a very specialized retinal surgical instrument, probably not appropriate for a general clinical journal. If your research is basic science, again, it wouldn't be a clinical journal, and vice versa. If you have clinical research, probably not the best choice for submission is a basic science journal. So you want to choose something appropriate for what you're talking about. You should decide on your choice early in the preparation of your manuscript, because different journals have different formats, different themes. So when you're putting together your ideas, putting together the draft, you should have target journals in mind and know what kind of format they require. You also don't want to just choose any journal. You want to choose a journal that has a meaningful reputation and or impact factor, especially now with the proliferation of the internet. There are many, many of these questionable journals out there, and you just don't want to have something published on the internet. It should be in something respectable, something that your colleagues will read, something that's worthwhile to be published in. And finally, this relates to what I just said. Beware of solicitations. With these online journals proliferating, there are also some journals that seem to be inviting you to submit manuscripts. You get an email saying, inviting you to be editor for a specific issue of a journal. or to write a particular manuscript, and you start going into the process, and then later on they tell you that the charge is $1,000. So you have to be aware of this because this is increasing. Be aware of what journal you're submitting to, reputation impact factor. This concept of journals soliciting people for profit has reached a point where it was an article in the New York Times last year, and this librarian calls those journals predatory journals. They seem very, very legitimate, but then after you've gotten the process and your thing is about to be published, by the way, $1,000, $2,000 per page. So beware of predatory journals. Do number 2, read and follow the instructions. This seems very basic, but you'd be surprised how many times this is not done. You want to pay attention to fonts, word count, image specifications. Unfortunately, the different journals are different. It's not a uniform format. I wish it were a uniform format, but it varies from journal to journal. You want to pay attention to formatting of references. There are different ways to format references. Again, it's not universal across the journals. The number of files. Sometimes the journal says the legends are supposed to be in the main manuscript. Sometimes it's separate. All of these technical details are important to follow. And finally, the abstract format. It's not always purpose, methods, results, conclusions. Different journals have different ideas. Again, this goes back to choosing a journal early in the process because it helps you formulate your ideas when you formulate the abstract in the way that the journal requires. And just one example, for some reason, the British Journal of Ophthalmology requires that a table has to be embedded in the main text file instead of being separate, which is the case for every other journal I know of. You just have to pay attention to the instructions. Do number 3, spend time on the title and the abstract. I think the title and the abstract often get a short shift. People concentrate on the manuscript and maybe they save that for last. But I would say the title and the abstract are probably the most important parts of the submission, especially if you're submitting to a good journal. Busy editors, busy reviewers really get turned off or turned on by a good or a sloppy title/abstract. You want the title and the abstract to be concise, accurate, and of interest. The abstract should be clear and convincing. You're trying to make a point in your publication. You're just not stating something. You're trying to convince the reader of something. Again, busy reviewers turned off by sloppy titles, abstract. I really would spend significant time making sure that the title and abstract are very good. Consider these 2 titles for the same subject matter: A Study of Labor Congenital Amaurosis versus Clinical Exam Predicts Genetic Causes of Labor Congenital Amaurosis. One title is much more relevant, much more of interest to a reader, something that is more likely to be read, more likely to be looked at, whereas the other one is just more bland and not really putting across a point. Do number 4, make use of the cover letter and reviewer selection. Many journals now, of course, you have to submit a cover letter, and very often there's a choice for suggesting reviewers or even excluding reviewers. And this is often glossed over, but I would suggest that you take advantage of this. The cover letter should not just state, "This is a submission, please consider it for publication." The cover letter should enthusiastically convey why the study is relevant. This is your chance to tell the editor and tell the reviewer why you think this should be published. What's the relevance of this study? Reviewer selection is an opportunity for a review by qualified individuals. Sometimes you have situations where your work is not reviewed by someone who is competent in the material, to be frank. And sometimes things are rejected or do not get good reviews because the reviewer really was not that familiar with the material. So your chance to avoid this problem is to suggest qualified reviewers where that option is there in the manuscript submission. Again, reviewer selection is also an opportunity to avoid biased reviewers. There are some situations where people are not friendly to your work, and some people are actually biased against your work. It could be competitors. This doesn't happen often, but it's there. So if there's someone who really you have bad relations with for whatever reason, this is an opportunity to state this reviewer should be avoided. Also someone who's familiar with the study, because you shouldn't have anyone reviewing the work who knows who's involved in the study. So consider these two statements in the cover letter. One is, please consider the attached submission for publication. The other, we found clinical exam can predict the underlying gene mutation for Leber congenital amaurosis. Results of this study would be of value to ophthalmologists who care for such children. So you can see one cover letter is just very bland, and it's as if it's not even there. But the other one makes the point of why this study should be published and what the use of it is to ophthalmologists. Final do, reread and recheck before submit. That is, before you push the submit button, make sure that you've gone through everything. You shouldn't rush it. I mean, there is this temptation to just get it out there, get it off your desk. But I would advise that it's helpful, even when you've gotten everything ready for submission, just let it sit for 1 or 2 days and then review everything, because sometimes you see things differently when you take a look at it on another occasion. So you want to be prompt in your submission, but you don't want to rush it. You really want to make sure it's your best work possible. Again, you want to make sure journal instructions are followed. Step in the wrong direction. If the formatting is not proper, that suggests sloppy work. And recheck spelling and literature one last time. It's really a poor reflection on work when there are spelling mistakes. These things really do make a difference versus no spelling mistakes. And you want the literature to be up to date as of the time of submission, not from when you first started your work. And one really bad one and recurrent one is ophthalmology is very commonly misspelled. And we shouldn't misspell ophthalmology or other words when we submit a manuscript. It really reflects poorly, and it can have a negative bias against your work, actually, when a reviewer looks at it. So those are 5 do's. Now we go to the don'ts, and the don'ts are always more exciting. Let's start with the first one. Don't republish data, plagiarize, or lie. Now this sounds pretty basic also, but again, it's not always followed. And I think that some people don't have a good concept of what plagiarism is. So let's take a minute and talk about it. Plagiarism is to steal and pass off the ideas. Complicated sentences makes you sound smarter. Actually, it's the opposite. You want to avoid complicated language. You want to make things simple. He says, with a little practice, writing can be an intimidating and impenetrable fog. Want to see my book report? And then he talks about his book report, which is a very long, complicated title for a simple nursery rhyme. And this is exactly what you shouldn't be doing. What they're doing here is making fun of the point that some people feel you have to have complicated, inflated language. No, it should be simple to the point. Number 3, don't be sloppy with revising and resubmitting. You should expect that your manuscript will come back for revision. That is almost 100% of the time there will be a revision no matter how good the manuscript is. And when that happens, you shouldn't put it off. You should complete the revision immediately, but again, not hastily. What do I mean by that? I mean you want to address all of the points in a proper way as soon as possible, but don't rush and answer them. And again, you want to make things easy for the reviewer or editor. Remember that these reviewers and these editors are overworked and they're often not paid. And really, the easier you make things for them, the better your chances for being accepted. Even if the instructions don't say it, if you're giving a revision, you should make it very, very clear how you change the manuscript. You should have a highlighted copy. You should tell the line numbers. Even if they don't ask for that, make it easy for the reviewer to editor to see what you did and explain exactly point to point how you answered the concerns. Again, don't rush with this. You want to answer everything appropriately. Make sure there's an answer for everything. Invitation to revise is often but not automatically a sign of acceptance. So this is your opportunity. You've got your foot in the door with a revision, but you're not in yet. So take advantage of this and don't be sloppy with revising or resubmitting. Point number 4 for don'ts. don't take the reviewer or editor comments personally. There are inevitably bad reviewer comments or even bad editor comments. And frankly, sometimes the reviewer just doesn't understand what you're saying and doesn't understand the subject as well as you do. If a comment seems rude, you just need to ignore the tone, answer the point, don't respond angrily, don't respond hastily. You just want to try to answer the point and ignore if there's any tone to it. Don't try to identify the reviewer and chase him down or her down. I don't think that's helpful. It's better not to identify the reviewer. And in the end, keep in mind, revisions actually do make the manuscript better. So welcome the revision. It can seem like a pain in the neck. It can seem like the person doesn't know what he or she is talking about. But just address it. There is some point there. Explain your reasoning. And in the end, revisions make things better. So here's an author, and this guy is commenting, your style is really cartoony. And that's sort of an insult. But the reviewer says, okay, thank you, and he's taking it in stride. He's not taking it seriously. But then when the reviewer makes it clear that he's being a little nasty, the author changes what he says. Now, you shouldn't do that. You have to stay calm. Don't get angry. Look what the comment is and objectively answer it. Don't get upset. So, the final don't is don't give up. If you really have something that's meaningful and you believe in it and it's good work and there's really a result there, there is a place for it. Rejection of a study could be the study is bad, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. It could be the journal purview. That is to say, what the journal usually publishes. It just might not be the proper subject matter. Again, going back to what I said beginning, if you have a study on a very specific surgical retinal instrument, that might not be appropriate for a general ophthalmology journal because the general readership, it might not be appropriate for that, and the journal has very limited space. So it might be more appropriate for a journal like Retina. So again, keep in mind this concept that different journals have different purviews or different audiences. If you really want to, you can appeal a rejection. That's often unsuccessful, but if you really think you have a good case, and you think somehow the reviewer is biased, which does happen sometimes, you do have the option to appeal. In the majority of cases, I don't suggest that, but if you really feel that you're on strong footing, that is an option. The best option, though, is to revise and resubmit to a different journal, a journal that, again, the best reputation, impact factor for the particular subject matter that you're dealing with. And please remember that rejection is not necessarily a reflection of poor work. I think if you've never gotten a rejection, you're not submitting that often because in this process, it always happens. So again, after you've submitted, if you get a rejection, don't give up, revise, resubmit, and you'll find a place for your work if it was done properly and you have a strong conclusion. So those are the 5 don'ts. These are the do's and don'ts. I thank you for listening. And again, thank you for the research department for putting this series of lectures together. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak, for the kind invitation and the opportunity to speak to you about criteria for successful acceptance in our research paper. Inevitably, I'm going to be redundant in a few things of the talk that Arif just gave, but I think it will be good to listen over and over again to some of the things that we should do and don't do to be able to publish our work. So the first thing that I'd like to talk about is how to start writing. And I think we have to think of writing an article or any other kind of research as an art. and an inspiration. At least I think about it that way because I really like what I do, and I like to feel well and inspired when I'm writing something in my field. You need to plan. You need to be sure of what you're going to do and read a lot about the topic. You want to work hard, and you need to do it for love. You have to really enjoy it. I understand that in many cases, especially here and any academic institution, our residents and fellows are obligated to publish a minimum amount of articles, but we're talking about 1 or 2 articles. We're not talking about a big deal. For promotion, you also need to have a number of articles in your career if you're going to stay in academic medicine. If you don't like writing, I would say just go to private practice and enjoy making money. Don't be on an academic institution. In an academic institution, you are supposed to write articles. You're supposed to do research and be good at it, and that's going to help you become higher in your ranking and compared to your peers. So it should not be an obligation, in my view, although the exception is, of course, when you're a resident or you are a fellow, you have to do 1 or 2 projects, but that, again, is not a big deal to do that for a limited number of years. You have to start somewhere, and I would say it's very important to read everything that is published on the topic that you're interested on. There is no way that you can tell if anything that you're thinking about is worthwhile of publication if you don't know what's been published before. So you have to really read on the topic extensively before starting to planning and making your own questions. You should select a topic, and it's important after you select a topic. I think selecting a mentor is important so that he can guide you through the process. You make your questions and hypotheses regarding what you think is interesting on the topic that you're interested on. And another important issue is to consult a statistician early on your research. You want to know if the study will be powered to respond the questions that you have and go through the ethics committee and IRB, and this is already mentioned in this course before. So one of the things that are important when you are talking to the statistician is to try to determine again the power and significance of the paper. Depending, you will determine here how many patients you need to include in your study, and to try to avoid errors such as the type 1 and type 2 errors. So where to start? Well, you're going to, once you have a clear idea of what you want to do, you want to start collecting the data, and you will write the paper and send it to the journal, make revisions, this is a very complex process. But what I want to come here is to the point that it's important to learn the process by being involved in everything, in all the steps of the process. If you only collect the data and forget about it and expect that your mentor or the person writing the article will include you in the manuscript, you're not really learning how to do research. You're not going to learn how to do it yourself in the future. When you start collecting your own data, you operate on your own patients, and you want to show what your new technique is, if it's effective or not, or compare it to another technique, you're not going to be able to do it. You don't know how to do it. So you have to learn the process being involved in all the different steps of the research, and of course persevere. Arif said something very important. You have to continue even if you get rejections. Everybody gets rejection. All of us get rejections for journals. It's impossible if you really do research and submit papers to journals. It's impossible that you don't get rejections, and you should not even care. You look at the reviews that are going to come with that rejection. make your changes to the paper, make the paper better, because something that the reviews make is that the paper is going to be better version after version, and then you submit it to another journal, and you persevere, you continue, you go on. And if it is rejected again, you do the same thing. And eventually you will receive, if it is a good paper, you will receive reviews for revision, and then you do that again, but now it's a revision, and of course, and you never take a revision as a problem. The revision is a good thing. You have a good chance, like Arif said, to get in. So you have the foot in the door. So you have a chance of getting that paper published. So you make your revisions and you send it back to the journal, and you do it carefully. So you have to persevere. Read the literature on the topic of interest again. Identify what is known. Ask the new questions, because again, you need to know everything beforehand, everything that is known on the topic, so that you can know what is really new. Ask the new questions and consider then whether the study that you're planning is valuable enough and of significance to be published. This is a different worksheets that are study design worksheets that are published in ophthalmology. They are published in 2003. The reference is here on the slide. And the only one that is an obligation to be filled for submission is the one on randomized controlled trial. And it's the one that you can find online now in ophthalmology. But there is a long list that are designed for every type of a study that you could think of, and they are shown here. And if you follow this design list, if you will help you answer all the questions that are needed per each section of your manuscript. So, for example, it will ask you about the characteristics of your title, the characteristics of the abstract, different questions about the introduction, the methods, the results, and your discussion. And by answering those questions, looking at your manuscript and answering the questions here in this questionnaire, then you will realize that something is missing, and then you go back to your manuscript and complete it. And this way, you will have a better chance of having a complete manuscript at the time of submission of that of your article. So like I mentioned, in ophthalmology in 2014, the only one that is obligatory is the randomized clinical trial one, and it's the one that you're going to find online. But again, this is published in 2003, and I think it's quite useful to guide us in writing, especially when you are starting. Let's talk a little bit about something that I think is important, which is the discussion of your results. This is probably the most difficult part of writing a manuscript. This is, if you look at the journey from an idea to publishing a paper that has been described in this course for several weeks now, you go from the idea to proposing it to the IRB, then you make your action plan of that proposal, and then you present that idea and results in a manuscript, but then you want to find a way to discuss it properly in the article, and already Arif mentioned very wisely how to choose the right journal and how to handle a rejected paper. I think those are important things as well. So regarding the discussion, and again, these are the different sections of the article, you have to think about the discussion section as your opportunity to summarize the results of your research. And you should do that at the beginning of the discussion. And you will have the opportunity to emphasize the new and important aspects of your study. So you begin listing the key findings of the study and answering the questions that you posed yourself, the hypothesis that was made at baseline. Avoid overinterpretation of the data. This is something that all editors and reviewers hate. They look at your conclusions and they say, well, but this is not supported by the data. This is a key element to be rejected. So always conclude based on what you found in your study. This is quite important. Compare your results with the literature then, both good things and bad things about your study, and mention everything that is relevant in the literature. And it is important also to have a paragraph at least on the list of your limitations in your study. And this is important because if you don't mention that you had a small number of patients and a retrospective nature of your study, for example, the reviewers will. But if you already mention it in your discussion, the reviewers may not mention that, or if they do, they will say, well, but the authors do recognize that they have these limitations, and this is a good thing. At the end of the discussion, it is important to include a summary or a conclusion of about 1 or 2 paragraphs. I usually do 1 paragraph that should be brief and should not be a repeat of the discussion. You make your own final conclusion or summary. And again, they should be based on the results of the study. This is what the reader will get at the end of reading your article, and will take like a home message. And this is as well very important. And it should be different as well as the conclusions on of the abstract. A little bit of words regarding references. Do not use, I think this has been mentioned before, but do not use abstracts or chapters or reviews. I have seen this a lot on some of our residents and fellows when they write an article and we have to review it. The recommendation is to go to the primary source, go to the article that that published initially on the issue. You have to follow the style of each journal because each and every one may be different. And again, from 20 to 40 references on average is enough unless it is a review article. These are examples of the way you can reference a book or a paper. Avoid communications in meetings. When you have an important comment to make about a presentation that was made at the Academy, you make the comment, and then in parentheses, you would include unpublished data, if it is not published, of course, unpublished data, and then mention American Academy of Ophthalmology annual meeting, the year, the month of the year. So this is the way that you will reference in the text, not in the reference, because it's not a published study yet. So avoid, again, using reviews, book chapters, use the primary source. Always make a new search of the literature at the end of when you finish your manuscript. It is important because the number of papers that are published just increase exponentially every day. And while you send the paper for review to your other co-authors and you get it back and you're satisfied and you make a new search of the literature, you will be surprised how 1 or 2 new articles are already published and you have to get them in before submission. And this accuracy of the references is your responsibility as an author. The cover letter, Arif already alluded to, is very important. It's your opportunity to tell them how important your study is and why it should be published. You should get acquainted with electronic submissions, so that's why I say you have to be involved from the collecting data to electronic submission of the paper, otherwise you're not going to learn how this is done. And Arif also mentioned the scientific dishonesty. Avoid at all means fabrications, duplication, falsification, plagiarism. It is very important to remember that it takes maybe 15, 20, even more years to create credibility. And people will respect you for that. But only one mistake like this, which is huge, will destroy it forever. Nobody will believe you anymore. So keep that in mind. Regarding the authors, everyone must take responsibility from planning to publishing of the study. All authors should be able to defend the paper, so they should know it thoroughly. And the sequence of authors should be defined to avoid conflicts, although sometimes it's difficult before the study is finished to know what was the actual contribution of each of the authors or co-authors is not that easy. But please remember that there are some specific criteria by the International Committee of Medical Journal and Editors to consider that one person is eligible to be an author, and these are substantial contribution to the conception and design or acquisition of data or analysis and interpretation of data. In addition, drafting the article or revising it critically for important intellectual content. And third, final approval of the version to be published. So just collecting some cases and then forgetting about it is not enough to be considered an author. So you have to really be involved in the whole process. So each author should review the final manuscript. This is very important. Authorize that the name is going to be on the final list of authors, and they should be listed according to the contribution, maybe with the exception of the last author that is always or usually reserved for the most experienced or senior researcher. The writing style, again, depending on the journal, English is very important, and use the spell checker all the time in all your versions. Professional English editor is very useful. These are some examples of ones that you can use online. Research has available to us that opportunity as well, and we should use it. And the bibliography search is made by now very easily through internet with PubMed and Scopus and other options. Please remember that for prospective studies, if you from the beginning do not register that study in clinicaltrials.gov, you're going to have a very hard time publishing that study. Most of the important journals are going to require that at the time of submission because this is important that it's there and to show that your study was started at a particular time and your protocol has been followed, and they can all check that this is the way it's been done once your study is submitted. So in summary, I think publishing includes a lot of art and inspiration. You have to do it for love. Regarding the discussion of the results, summarize the original research and emphasize the new and important aspects of your study. You do that from the beginning of the discussion. You list the key findings of the study. Avoid overinterpretation of the data. This is most important. And compare your results with the literature. List the limitations of the study and have a final paragraph on the conclusions and summary. Thank you very much. What is what?
Limitation of your study or criticizing the paper?
Well, the listing the limitation of the studies, you're going to do it yourself. And so you're going to be very kind. It's not going to be a criticism. You're going to do it in a very nice way because you're going to say it's a small number of patients in a retrospective study, but we had the opportunity to visualize with ICG all of our patients, and we had the opportunity to very nicely determine the amount of choroidal ischemia that our patients with Behçet's had, for example. So you do criticize in a way, but in such a nice way, your limitations. You put it in a way that you also can mention something nice about it and make it look good. So it's very different than when somebody else comes and rips your paper off. Yes, Akil. Yes, you can, absolutely.
How would you do that? Because usually you don't find any.
You do put the names of the authors, the article's title, the journal where it's going to be published, and then the year, and after that you put impress, period. That's all that you need to do, and it's fine. When the article is published, usually that article, your article is published, hopefully. The article that you had impressed in your references is going to be maybe online, and you will be able to change that. Even the editorial team will send you a request for updating at the time of reviews.
Good. So, like I said, this talk was supposed to be given by Dr. Abu Amra, who could unfortunately not make it here. So I'm going to give you a few pearls and tips on writing a paper, and based on my experience and some of the interactions I've had with many journals. So one of the things to remember, even before you start working on a paper or a project, is to sort of look at these questions and ask yourself these questions. And these are questions which a reviewer is also going to ask when they are going to review your paper or look at your paper. Is what you're doing is new? Is it new? Is what you're doing is true? And is the information that is presented in your research useful information for our patients or for our community? So I think each time you think of a project or think of doing something, you need to ask yourself these three questions, and I'm going to repeat this over and over again. So what do we mean by is it new? So this is really a critical question, and really it doesn't have to be an earth-shattering discovery. It can be a new observation, a new technique, a new demographic feature, a new type of testing, a different type of clinical outcome that you got that was in the literature, something that's not been reported before in a particular population, and it may not be the same that is published elsewhere. Now, this is especially true when you're submitting a quote-unquote rare case report. The fact that the case was rare doesn't mean that a journal is going to accept it. You have to point out something new that it's going to contribute to the literature, not just because it's the second case in the literature. That's not what is going to catch the attention of the reviewer or the editor. Now, you really need to clearly sell this point about what's new in the abstract, the introduction, and in the section on the on discussion. And as Dr. Khan pointed out, probably another good place to point this out is in your letter to the editor, so that if the editor sees that, an editor usually doesn't have a lot of time to go through your whole paper, but if you can sell that point in your submission letter, that would be very useful. So is it true? And this is again a question that the reviewer is going to ask, and you need to ask yourself, is the study design accurate? Is the data collection correct? Is the statistical analysis appropriate? Is the interpretation accurate? And is the discussion to the point, and does it really interpret what you have in the results section? And the last question that is asked by a reviewer, is this really useful information? And if you think that the information is useful, please point it out in your paper and make sure that you, especially in the section on discussion, and also in the section on introduction, that what you've done is really worthwhile and useful to your patients and to the community. Now, some of the other important issues we need to think about, of course, you need to make sure you have IRB approval, and that include that statement in the literature. And who should be an author? And I think Dr. Aravallo nicely pointed this out, and I'm not going to repeat this. Basically, the bottom line is that each author should have made substantial intellectual contributions and also be responsible for reviewing, drafting, or revising the article, and author should meet these conditions. There's always a confusion about first author versus a PI. Ideally, the PI should do most of the work and write the paper and be the first author. Globally, on research grant-based papers, usually the PI is the corresponding author. It's the PI who decides who is the first author, depending on the amount and effort put into the project and writing of the paper. And often in large institutions like this, there are often lots of gray areas, and some of these are listed in this particular slide. I'm not going to go over them. This is a whole topic of discussion in itself. For example, PI does most of the work, leaves and does not write the paper and complete the data analysis. The paper is left there. What happens with that project? Does somebody else take over? Who's the first author? And so these are different scenarios, and I'm not going to discuss this. We can discuss this at a later point. Among the co-authors, you must come to an agreement who's really going to be in charge, decide on the order of authors early on in the manuscript process. The author should point out their conflicts of interest. Make sure you have correct name and affiliations. For example, for correct names, decide on what author name you're going to use. So what your initial is, and sometimes, especially In the Middle East, many of you have the Al-Judan or so you want to make sure you have whether you're going to hyphenate it, not hyphenate it, how it's going to be presented, because you might have authors with the same name, and you want to make sure you get the credit and you don't get mixed up, especially if somebody's searching on PubMed for your papers. It's very important. Make sure you have the affiliation spelled right, okay? So how do we spell King Khalid Hospital, Eye Hospital? Many of you have spelled it as with an I and with an E. Make sure we have the right way you spell so that you can search for the right articles and again, decide on who the corresponding author is going to be. So when you package your manuscript, as Dr. Khan nicely pointed out and Dr. Aravallo, be concise, be descriptive. This is your first chance to grab the reader's attention and your reviewer's attention. So 2 examples here. The first one is a more general one, asking a question, but really doesn't tell you anything about the paper. The second one really tells you a little bit more about what the design of the study was, what the study population was, what was exactly done in the study. So probably is a more attractive and a more appropriate title. So be concise, be descriptive, and you really need to pay time and pay attention when you decide what the title of your manuscript is going to be. An abstract, again, is very important. Make sure you summarize the abstract. Most journals will limit the number of words. They're typically 200 to 250 words. Spend 2 sentences describing the journal problem. You describe the techniques. Don't avoid using details. Report the most significant results and concluding statements. And of course, you don't use references in your abstract. Again, the common errors in the abstract when we look at journals, the hypothesis is not stated, journal instructions are not followed, most important results are not highlighted, abstract results are not same as that stated in the manuscript, and this very often happens when you write the abstract, you send it to different your co-authors, they make comments, things change, and you forget to change the abstract. And then the conclusion doesn't match the abstract, or it's too strong. And when you make things too strong, like saying that medication X is the most superior medication to lower IOP, it's going to tick off the reviewers and it really is looked on fairly negatively. So you really want to represent what you're saying in an accurate fashion. Your introduction, again, should be limited to a few paragraphs. You introduce the subject, state the knowledge gap, state the research question clearly, and do not make your introduction a mini review. Okay, that's not the purpose of an introduction. So here are some examples of a review from an introduction from Miaggio, from a paper published, pointing out what is important, the actual problem, what the knowledge gap is, and what the research question is. So if you structure your introduction in that way, it makes it easier for your reviewer to read it. So in methods, again, you want to make sure you have enough detail that the reader could replicate your study, pay attention to pointing out the study design, the sample size, technical information. Don't just say that SPSS was the used for analysis. You really want to specify what you did exactly for each particular analysis that you did. Try to write in third person and past tense because this is what you did in the past, not what you're doing or what you will do. Provide results that are relevant to your research, clear and simple. State absolute numbers, also avoid decimal values for things like IOP, like 20.2222, just because the program gave it, you round it off the figures. And again, as Dr. Khan and Dr. Aravallo pointed out, use graphs and tables when you have large data. It makes it much simpler to review. You don't repeat the data that's provided in the tables. You might want to highlight them in your section on results and provide analysis by variables if applicable. So if you have a lot of variables and you've collected all of them, you should analyze them in some way or fashion when you write your results section. So common errors are interpreting the results in the section which really should go in the discussion, repeating data, not providing statistical tests used to derive p-value. You just put the p-value there. Poorly constructed tables and figures and not using the correct tense and writing. Dr. Aravallo again pointed out how you need to write a discussion very well. Again, just this sort of summarizes what he just pointed out. I'm not going to spend much time, but basically you really need to not make it a mini review. So here's an example of a nice introductory statement. It basically points out the problem and also the main, the essence of the study and the results that you've gotten. Here's another one that was, again, these are all real examples that you don't start making this a mini review, okay? And of course, notice there are many spelling errors also. Here's another one that's probably not something you want to do, risk factors for failure, described by the Russians in the summer of '62. And, it kind of overstating what the results were and not very appropriately put together. So the don'ts in the results section is you don't introduce new results, you don't indulge in unwarranted speculation, you don't inflate the importance of your findings, you don't repeat the results, you don't overinterpret the results, don't focus on tangential issues, focus on your primary outcome measure, don't use biased language or biased citations. Some people, there are people who like to cite their own work all the time, and you want to try to avoid that, give others credit also. And again, don't confuse statistical significance with clinical importance. For example, if you have an IOP difference of 0.9 and you have a p-value that's significant, make sure you understand that really, is this really clinically significant, having a 0.9 difference? It might be, of course, some of the do's, use the correct tense, active voice, be concise, precise, make your points clearly. And if you use the first person, it's okay in certain circumstances, but you really often distract the reader from the main point. So some of the tips, again, just to repeat what was just said, remember the golden rules, the 3 golden rules we talked about. Consult a biostatistician. I like to start writing with material methods, followed by results and the discussion, and write the abstract last, because then you don't miss things. Read your paper many times before submitting, and I think Dr. Khan nicely pointed that out. Ask a colleague to review sometimes. Sometimes we all think that our work is the best, and really it's extraordinary stuff, and most often it is. But you can miss things, and I think if you have a colleague review and critique your paper, it's always useful. Submit to the appropriate journal. This is redundant, but I'm going to repeat that again. Follow journal instructions. Use a language editor. We have this facility available, and if those of you don't know about it, please contact Fatima in the research department. Do not plagiarize. Again, to add another point, most journals have plagiarism software available online now. And so we, for Miagio, for example, we run it through that, and it easily picks up what's been published in full text. So it'll highlight it to us, and that's an immediate reason for rejection for many of the journals. So basically, the technical editor will plug your paper in, and immediately it'll highlight areas and actually point out the journal where you took that little piece of information from, or that sentence from. And so you really don't want to do that, because again, it's negative for your paper, negative for your career, and just gives a very bad impression to the journal and the editorial staff. So please avoid plagiarism in any way or form. Again, to repeat what Dr. Khan and Dr. Aravallo said, once you get the review back, typically there's a period of anger, of frustration, and it's, how can the reviewer have said that? Read the reviewer's comments carefully, get a good night's sleep, or maybe 2 nights of sleep, and then respond to the reviewer's comments in time. Respond courteously, even though they can be, very nasty comments. You see that less and less now. People are actually more polite now than they used to be, I think, in the right comments. But respond courteously and positively, even if you disagree with the reviewer. You can say that you respectfully disagree, and you point out the points why you disagree. And if an editor will look at it in a fair way and agree or disagree with what you have said. Again, don't get discouraged if your paper is rejected. Reflect, revise, resubmit. Again, we've talked about this many times. And of course, you celebrate when you're successful, when your paper is accepted, rejoice in it, and get to working on your next paper, and happy writing. So with this, we conclude our series of mini symposia on how to do research at KKH for this year. Thank you to all those who have helped in putting your talks together and providing excellent material during the presentation, and be happy to answer any questions to me or Dr. Khan or Dr. Aravallo. Questions from the audience. Dr. Mutava, question for you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Edward, Rifalu, and Khan. Actually, it's a comment and question. First, the comment I would like to just mention to our resident and fellow, they are very lucky, and this is honestly speaking. Now it's time to use the facility. In the past, we don't have even somebody to guide us, to tell us how to write a manuscript, to anything. You might wait till you are in R4, and when you write your thesis, you will find difficulty. Now from R1, they are having all the facility. They can have the advisors. They can have many things. So please, this is a good chance for every one of you, and make sure to get benefit from this. And I think this is the best timing for the people to learn and to write a manuscript. And this is all people. They have the skills to write a manuscript, to write a paper. The problem, how to do it in the beginning. If they were able to do it, it will be something as a habit, and they will not face any problem. So this is a comment, and I hope our resident and fellow will get benefit from this facility and this well-organized things. And thank you very much for making this series of lecture. The question, if R1 need to write a manuscript, do you have advisor so he can come to the advisor and tell him how to write the manuscript? And the advisor, are they all the time, or just only they should come directly to you and you can assign somebody to help him?
So if you have, that's a good question. So the question was whether there's an R1 who has finished a project, correct? Collected all the data. And
Even before he finished, he is planning to do something,
planning to
and he needs
publish his
somebody to
data.
guide him
Okay,
and to help him. So,
So-
we wanted to take it as practical point of view
okay.
instead
So-
of just only.
So there are three options here really. So the first one is hopefully the thesis or the resident is a part of a thesis or a project they've done. They probably have a mentor, right? Probably a mentor or thesis advisor. That will be the first person to approach. And I would say most often that person would be hopefully helpful in helping them formulate the ideas, highlighting the main points that you can get out of the results. That's usually a roadblock. You know, you have the results, you have a lot of data, it looks all of it looks exciting, but usually the mentor can help you pull those points out for you. Okay, even though you might have analysis and everything is significant, you know, all the p-values look very exciting, but the mentor can probably help you extract that. The mentor can probably also help you extract the main points that need to go into the discussion. We are always there to help in research. Both Dr. Rajiv and I are always available as consultation. But I think in terms of how these things should be handled, the message to the residents are really, you have a mentor, you have a thesis advisor, make the best of them. Make the best of them to get that thing done. If additional help is needed, say both the mentor and the R1 or the R2 can't get around, we are there to help, right? And if we don't know, we'll seek help elsewhere. In the end, if something has to be done, we'll work a way to make sure it happens at some point. And we've had many examples of that for people who've never done research before and are frightened to do research, and we've tried to walk them through it. But the point you're making is that there is help available always.
Absolutely. What my suggestion, if you have one session per week, this is open. People should schedule either with you or doctor, whatever. So he can advise, he can guide people, he can just make it something official and regular. So they will just keep in touch with the research department. And for example, if you have, for example, Monday morning or Tuesday morning, it's all for advising people who is interested to write.
And that's available too, absolutely. So I have about 4 or 5 people who meet with me on a weekly basis, and we actually go over their projects on a weekly basis, including the ones that I those who are working with me as an advisor. That's a mandatory requirement with me. They have to meet with me, even if it's for 5 minutes per week. And once I get comfortable with them, I let them go a little bit, maybe once a month, but in the beginning, it's once a week.
It's exactly like driving a car. In the beginning, you need somebody to help you.
Right.
Then that's it.
Any other questions? I think we're a little bit over time, but again, I'd like to thank everybody for attending, and I'd like to congratulate the speakers and thank all the speakers who took part in the last 4 weeks. And special thank to Dr. Owais for actually organizing everything and getting everything into a nice symposium. Thank you all.